Thank you. The last presentation for the day, so I shall try and make it as lively as possible. It's not so dry as it would seem in GST, so what I thought to do is do something a little bit different. First part of my presentation is just going to go through and see what the impact of the GST was pre-GST, just very quickly on that, one slide on that. And then after which I'm going to just share, maybe give us a little bit more hope as to what the property market will present for us. And I'm going to stretch everyone and look and ask everyone to think about property investment 5, 10, 15 years ahead. And I'm going to explore the macroeconomic environment for Malaysia, from not only Malaysia's statistics point of view, but I'm going to share it from statistics taken from the World Bank, the UN, and a couple of other organizations that are tracking Malaysia's performance. So looking from outside in, not so much what Malaysia government is telling us how well we're doing. So I think hopefully that will give us some hope in terms of where the property market will be in the next 5 to 10 years. So just very quickly, I've got 15 minutes, I've got 15 slides, so I'm going to go through very fast. Very quickly, this is just some transacted trends. There's no numbers there and such as that I'm not going to ask you to look at. It's more the trends I'm asking you to have a quick look at. So in terms of the volume and transactions pre-GST, so if you look at the slide there, 2012, 2013, 2014, and you've got 2015 first quarter, there is not much difference in terms of the values nor the transaction numbers pre-GST. So most of the transactions that I've taken here are from the Redfield Group, where the numbers that we transacted last year was about 6,000 to 7,000, so credible number there. Not much impact on terms of values nor the transaction values. So just very quickly, there's a decreasing savings level for Malaysia since 2008. If you look at the slide there, it might be a little bit small. Red is actually Malaysia. If you look at the savings that we have in Malaysia, we were almost touching 40% and we came down very consistent trend, heading down to around about 30% right now. I put a few more countries there as well. I put the Singapore there as well, and the US. US, no surprise, is right at the 20-something% level. But just interestingly, when you look at Singapore itself, though the subprime crisis after 2008, the prices of properties in Singapore went up just the same as Malaysia. The savings levels in Singapore was relatively still at very good levels, whereas Malaysia is still sliding. Household consumption also was rising since 2008. Consumption here, the numbers include also housing expense. So no housing expense, not so much from the housing loan point of view, but how much it would have cost someone to acquire that property. So that consumption there. So in Malaysia, if you look at the numbers, it's sliding. Also, the consumption has been increasing very, very steadily, especially after about 2008. Based on the statistics that was also shared a little bit earlier in terms of where that amount had been coming from, a large portion of the consumption in Malaysia actually comes from the housing sector. So it would then seem that when you look at the numbers here, the cost or the consumption for property or property in terms of rental or what it would have cost to acquire that property has been increasing over that same period as well. Very in line with the statistic that was shown a little bit earlier about the number of loans that was taken. So if you look at the number of loans that was taken in the last decade or so, the numbers have been on the rise. So very consistently that the consumption is due to housing. Consumption, I'm going to stretch everyone and look at what is then going to be the property market going to be like over the next 5 or 10 years. I've just pulled this statistic again from the World Bank and UN and put that in place. I know I'm stretching everyone there in terms of where we're going. The time frame is stretching between 2030, 2040, 2050. I think this is quite important to share because understanding that consumption is anticipated to grow, that you will consistently be growing, this anticipated to grow over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So consumption is going to be on the rise. And knowing that the consumption will mostly be coming from housing, we know that based on where we are going right now, we are going to be consuming more for housing itself. But the good thing is that everyone's income is going to rise. Right now in Malaysia, we're talking about GDP per capita income. We're sitting around about 11,000, 12,000 US per capita income. The capital income for Malaysia is going to be on the rise, so there's not so much issue there. So we are going to be all making more money as we go along. We are going to be making more. So that's a good thing. We're consuming more, but we're going to be making more. If you remember the statistics that was shared also earlier about the GDP per capita income that has grown over the last decade was about 160%. Housing only went up a smaller increment than that amount, 160%. If you're looking at GDP per capita income growing at the level that we're going to be growing at, government says that going to be US 15,000 GDP per capita. We are on track to that, and the numbers consistently growing. You would then naturally see possibly a large portion of consumption would most likely be going into property or able to go into property. Good news is that where we have a statistic here about the excess savings means the normal savings that you really need for retirement versus the savings that you're going to collect back, or the savings that you're going to be accumulating based on your GDP and what you're making. That gap is going to be continue to increase over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So it's perennially growing. The only question we have right now is with GST impact there. That impact there, we're not sure how much of that impact will have that impact on the savings that we're going to have as a country and as a per capita income. Good news is that population is going to be on rise for Malaysia, but as contrary to what everyone believes is that the world is not going to be growing at the same pace as we grew since the 1960s, 1970s. Malaysia's population at the rate that we are going right now, where the Gen Ys are getting married really late. I've got staff in my ex-company who are 38, 39-year-old ladies who are not even intending to get married, and very, very independent careers that they're having, where most of my staff in the previous company that I have are mostly unmarried individuals, and they're in the ages of 30, 34, 35. So we are going into a population right now where a lot of people are not looking for kids anymore. So in terms of population-wise, we are going to be slowing down in terms of our growth. So where with the strategy we were applying 20, 30 years ago in terms of how the market is moving, in terms of what the needs for property were, they might change over the next few years as Malaysia's population would top up probably around 40, 45 million in the next 30, 40 years. But good news is that well, before we do that, when we look at migration rates, this is migration inwards into the country. If you look at the migration rates there, ever since the last couple of years, it's actually been sliding. So now it's probably one of the lowest periods, the numbers that you have there. And the migration rates are not going to be really increasing for Malaysia. So that is not so great news in terms of population growth. But I guess the good news is that we still have and expecting over the next 5 years about 3 million people moving into urban areas. As this is the same number around about 3 million figure over the last 5 years. So 3 million people in the last 5 years consistently has been moving into the urban areas. So urban areas meaning moving into the capital cities or the more cities with better infrastructure, so your Malaccas, your Ipohs and cities such as that. So good news is 2015 to 2020 is that there'll still be about the same number of people who will be urbanizing. Now the challenge that comes is that if you see the graph there, in the next 10 years or so, the number will start to taper off. So what that would mean is that urbanization is going to reach a saturation point in around about 2030 or so. Now, we might not see very much of the impact in terms of what that would mean for us, but the growth of what we have been having in Klang Valley over the last 5-10 years has been massively because of a massive urbanization into the Klang Valley, urbanization perhaps into the JB market, into the Iskandar market, and into Penang market. It will reach a certain point of time where this population growth into the urban areas will start to slow down. So that's something to be cautious about in terms of where the property market will take us. But that doesn't mean, this is on the general scope of things, but that doesn't mean that the demand will not be there. I'll just share with you a little bit later. Okay. There's still going to be about 1.2 million people joining the workforce in the next 5 years. It's about the same number as in the last 5 years or so. So in terms of the number of new people coming into the demand for properties, there are still going to be demand. And I guess the great news is that because of the urbanization of the 3 million people coming into the cities, it will definitely mean that the GDP per capita income will definitely be rising. And because of the young population that we have right now, a lot of them are starting to get into the workforce that will continue to be so for quite a few years. One great thing that we have seen in Malaysia right now, which I guess sometimes doesn't get as much coverage as we should, is that the FDI that has been coming into Malaysia is expected to remain strong. So over the last couple of years, the FDI has been on the up and down, but it's expected, as you will see in the chart there, in the last 2 years or so, FDI has been really strong, expected to continue at that same level. FDI for infrastructure works in terms of transformation programs, as was stated a little bit earlier, those are expected to still be coming in. And just to finish off very quickly, a skeptic or not, but I do believe that our government is increasing the effectiveness, right, in terms of the way we manage our business with implementation of the different programs and infrastructure programs that we have coming in. So that would also mean that with whatever things that are coming online, the government has played quite a critical role in terms of ensuring better processes are in place. So what does that mean for the property market? And what's the outlook? Well, we have the impact on the property activity based on what's happened to GST has been quite minimal over the last couple of months. So although savings is decreasing since 2008, and household consumption has been on the rise. One good thing, I guess, that has been happening is that one question that we have is how much impact the GST would have on the consumption. But good thing is that the savings can continue to grow. So the true savings as such would still be there. Again, question is how much GST would impact on that. Although population will grow, we're going to have a still migration issue, but still we have people who are coming into the workforce, who are moving into urbanized areas. FDI is strong. My view is that the property market over the next 5 to 10 years will still be sustainable, understanding that Malaysia's property market is primarily driven by the local environment. Thank you very much.